Roy was not embarrassed by Zephyr. Zephyr looked at Roy in front of him with admiration. How satisfied he looked. Leadership, resourceful, appearance, charisma, there is enough self-discipline and passion. Who doesn't like such a student? He is already looking forward to it. Speech at the graduation ceremony. Apart from other things, just standing up with Roy's looks and figure, he will have more face. Just then. Buzzing. The sound of warships approaching ashore slowly sounded, and the voice of Lingbing came from the observation deck of the mast. Impel Down has arrived. Zephyr patted Roy on the shoulder, winked and laughed. Impel Down here, let's go. The two walked quickly to the deck, and Bullet was also escorted from the cabin prison. Magellan, wearing a gas mask, followed closely behind Bullet. Tisk tusk tusk, Impel Down. This place lousy is still here for the first time. Bullet's physique is quite amazing. At this moment, he has recovered a lot of physical strength. Although his face is still quite pale and exudes a weak breath, he has been able to resume normal walking. The sound of footsteps dragging the shackles made the faces of the new students slightly change. Don't worry, the rest of your life will be spent here. Zephyr said coldly. Bullet sneered, but suddenly looked at Roy beside Zephyr. This is the Marine kid who killed the Golden Lion on the battlefield. Roy squinted subconsciously. Bullet looked at Roy up and down, his sharp and curious eyes seemed to penetrate Roy's body. After a while, he suddenly burst into a ferocious laugh. Ha 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 ha. Marine boy, your name is Roy, right? What a beautiful job. Golden Lion bastard. Lousy wanted to kill him a long time ago. You did me a great favor. Ha 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 ha. Roy frowned, but did not speak. What's wrong? Marine kid. I heard that you found the Golden Lion on the main battlefield, but for revenge. Bullet laughed grinningly. Did anyone die to protect you? It's a pity. You were not in a civilian area, but you didn't see that lovely picture. Those civilians who are as weak as ants. One by one, they tried to stop me, ha ha ha. Just step on it like that, their bodies are like cockroaches being trampled on. He opened his arms in a mocking and contemptuous gesture. Roy's eyes were cold, and his fists were suddenly clenched. The other military academies also gritted their teeth, their eyes exuding angry red lights. Oh, I'm all angry. What's wrong? You guys are doing it. Bullet laughed wildly and pointed to himself. Come. Come and kill Lousy. Don't forget, maybe those civilians who were trampled to death by Lousy and ants in the civilian area are probably many of your friends and relatives. Damn you. Huo Xiao Shan suddenly yelled and drew his sword abruptly. But one hand pressed back the saber on his waist alive. Huo Xiao Shan was taken aback, but he saw Roy's back. Don't be impulsive. Roy said solemnly, his tone as cold as 1,000 years of ice. Huo Xiao Shan was dumbfounded, and immediately took a deep breath, pressed back the monstrous anger in his heart, and released the hand holding the knife. Zephyr looked at him with emotion. In this group of military academies, Roy already has absolute leadership without realizing it. He is looking forward to it more and more. When this class of military academy graduates and enters the military in major branches, the moment they grow up vigorously. Roy as their leader, what a powerful voice will have in the entire Marine system. Douglas Bullet, so is this what you learned from Roger? The weak eats the strong? Roy whispered severely. Bullet was taken aback when he heard the words, and then his eyes suddenly turned red and roared. You little devil, don't mention that name to Lousy. That bastard obviously possesses the strongest power, but tentatively yelled out his companions and dreams. It's all shit. His pupils were full of bloodshot eyes, and waves of majestic killing intent swarmed out of his body. Only being strong alone is the most important thing. The others are just dragging ants. So you lost in the end, and Roger became the One Piece. Roy suddenly interrupted Bullet, making the latter stiff. A person can't accomplish a great cause. That way you are doomed to be a lonely existence, and you will never be able to succeed. Roy's eyes slowly became calm. Behind him. The cadets couldn't help but look at each other, and then smiled. Shit. Bullet suddenly roared like crazy. I do not believe. Roger is the loser of the last era. Wait, Roy kid. One day, I will let you understand what is the real horror. Ha 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 ha. At that time, I want you to watch your so-called companions and comrades in arms with your own eyes, and die in front of you one by one. I want you to feel that kind of despair and powerlessness. Bullet's body was escorted into Impel Down, while grinning frantically. Roy clenched his fists and sneered. Let's talk about it when you come out of Impel Down. I guess you don't have such a chance. The Impel Down deep sea prison is the world's largest prison. It is completely sealed off by the calm belt and countless sea kings live in it. Coupled with the hello of superpowers like Magellan from time to time, it is impossible for Douglas Bullet to escape in a short time. Even according to the direction of the original plot, this guy will have a chance to escape at least after a war on the top 20 years later. At that time, Roy was confident that at that time, he definitely had enough ability to guard the things he wanted to guard. Bullet's frantic roar and laughter got farther and farther, and finally disappeared completely with the heavy closing of the big prison gate of Impel Down. Magellan turned to Roy at this moment and said solemnly, "Don't pay attention to that guy's clamor, it's impossible for me to give him a chance to escape." Roy shook his head disapprovingly and said, "I'm not afraid of that guy. On the contrary, I am looking forward to it." When he said that, the corner of his mouth was actually slowly sketching an unscrupulous arc. Magellan was taken aback when he saw this and couldn't help but smile. Teacher Zephyr, this new disciple, is really as vigorous as the rumors. But he changed his mind. The boy in front of him was a man who dared to challenge the Golden Lion single-handedly on the main battlefield, so Bullet was naturally not in his eyes. "You are a man." Magellan smiled. The next day, early morning, the clouds to the east gradually tore a crack. There was a short silver light shiningly bursting from behind the clouds. Roy stood at the window. After finishing the early morning training, he changed into a clean military uniform as always, folded the quilt into a square shape, and meticulously arranged his shirt and tie in front of the military mirror in front of him. This may be the first time he observes himself so quietly after the war. The impression of the original immature and green face in my mind has become extremely strange. The bronze skin, the cold and mature face in front of me, gradually become clear. The deep black eyes glowed with a deep brilliance. Roy was in a daze for a moment. Is this growth? He didn't know. But he could feel that his heart was no longer the anxiety and floating of the past. This kind of solid feeling is really not bad. Roy smiled at himself in the mirror. "Happy graduation," he said, and then turned around in a big stride. "Push the door out." Outside, the sun is shining. Bright and bright. Naval Headquarters. In front of the military school teaching building. On the towering and quaint stone monument, the sentence portrayed was particularly eye-catching in the morning sun. To fight for the rise of justice for a lifetime. The military academies who appeared here in 2s and 3s and began to gather all had bright smiles on their faces, embracing their youth recklessly. On the high platform, a group of Marine executives also gradually attended the meeting, with smiles on their faces. They looked at the young faces below with emotion, only feeling that they were in a much better mood. These are the future of Marine and justice. Zephyr, did you inform Roy about that in advance? This thing can't go wrong. Otherwise it will become a laughingstock as it used to be. Wearing an admiral uniform, Sengoku, who was sitting upright, suddenly approached Zephyr's ear next to him, and asked in a low voice. Zephyr nodded and smiled. "Don't worry, that kid Roy won't let us down." Sengoku nodded. His gaze drifted towards the absent-minded faces of Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru not far away. As if thinking of something in his mind, the corners of his mouth twitched subconsciously. "None of these bastards are reliable," he cursed inwardly. It's exactly 9 o'clock. Warm and gorgeous sunlight shed from the sky. Zephyr slowly stood up from his seat, and walked up the high platform along the red carpet with firm footsteps. The vigorous and powerful pace made the white cloak of justice behind him sway in the air endlessly. "Hello students." Zephyr picked up the microphone and smiled. At the same time, dump. A number of projection lights fell from all directions at the same time, focusing on Zephyr on the high platform. The video phone worms that link the entire Naval Headquarters Marineford and even Marine's major branches in the world are activated at the same time. Picture after picture appeared in front of the righteous forces of the whole world. Marine Academy's 7th graduation ceremony for military academies officially begins. I am Admiral of Headquarters Black Arm Zephyr, and I am also the Chief Instructor of Marine Academy. Zephyr's voice came out loudly through the microphone with a cheerful and heroic tone. He smiled very relievedly. Congratulations. Congratulations to all the Military Academy students who attended this graduation ceremony. After half a year of brutal training and intense learning, you finally grew from a naive rookie to a qualified soldier. Congratulations, I got the recognition from all of us. Smooth graduation. Next moment, the entire Naval Headquarters burst into enthusiastic applause. I sincerely congratulate you. Zephyr smiled happily, but his eyes were full of moist. You will walk out of the gate of this military academy today to welcome your future military career. This is a brand new life. Perhaps in terms of your long journey in the future, the short half-year time in the past is just a moment. Compared with the drama of your life that you are about to open, the bits and pieces that happen in the military academy are just a simple prologue. You will welcome a different life. Some people will return to their hometowns to build and protect your original land. Some people will go to other villages to guard and shelter the homeland of other people's homes. There will also be people who will follow the army to wander around and take the world as their home. But in any case, the old man congratulates you, put on this glorious and great military uniform, and shoulder the will of justice. Of course, Zephyr's face became serious and solemn. You will also face countless challenges. You will find that this world is not as perfect as you think. There will be corrupt officials, there will be bloodthirsty pirates. There will be ordinary people who complain about Marine's incompetence. Moreover, there are countless cumbersome things that can't make you realize your dreams. To be honest, this is not a perfect world. This is a terrible world. The opening of the great pirate era has made Marine, a profession that should be glorious and proud, become worthless. You will be saddened to see that there are countless young people about your age who carry the dream of so-called freedom, and wear the banner of the Shanghai thief, but trample on the happiness of others time and time again. You will be discouraged to find that there are broken families that are constantly appearing in front of you, but you can only stand by and helplessly watch them become more fragmented. Yes, even Marine can't guard or save everyone. But, what the old man wants to say is, no matter what happens to you in the future. What's going on, don't forget your original intention. Tragedies and disasters will always follow one after another. But your hearts must always be sunny and brave. Zephyr's voice gradually became lower and his mood gradually became generous. All the people present were silent and blushing, looking at their most respected teacher quietly, and there were extremely complex emotions in their hearts. This is not chicken soup. Because that old man used his past to prove everything he said. Everyone knows the tragedy that happened to him. The pain of losing a beloved wife overnight, the kind of pain that no one understands. But he still faces the world with a smile. Okay, let's stop here, otherwise you will dislike the old man nagging again. Zephyr smiled suddenly. Congratulations again. You will definitely become Marine's heroes. The old man believes in you. This is the worst time, but you are the best future. After speaking, he handed the microphone in his hand to Marshal Kong. Silence. The world seemed to be dumb at this moment. Marine Marshal Kong, who took the microphone, looked at the red-eyed students down the stage with emotion and sighed deeply in his heart. Zephyr, this guy is as great as ever. Obviously it is a very simple sentence. But it's straight into people's hearts. That is not the power of words and words, but the personality charm that comes from Zephyr's own experience. At least at this point, Marshal Sora had to admit. He is far inferior to Zephyr. He took a deep breath, then smiled. Students, to be honest, the old man is not willing to talk after your teacher Zephyr. I always feel that you have no intention of listening. There was a burst of kind laughter in the audience. Marshal Kong's rare humorous self-deprecating dispelled a lot of depression. But, can this matter continue to drag on? Otherwise, you probably all scold the headquarter for negligence in your heart. Slowly said. When the voice fell, the military academy graduates in the audience suddenly lit up. Yes, it's time to discuss merits and rewards. Kong took the document handed over by the guard sideways and opened it slowly. Marineford Defense Battle, all of your achievements have been counted. The old man and other high-level officials in this department have read them in detail, and they are all very happy and lamented for your excellent performance in that tragic war. But because you haven't graduated from the military academy and you don't have any military ranks, this matter of rewards for meritorious deeds has been delayed. But it's different now. Marshal Kong tapped on the microphone and laughed. You all graduated today. As the 7th graduate of the military academy, all of you will become a glorious Captain Marine. Then next. Marineford Defense Battle Cadet Award Ceremony. Empty waved his hand heavily. The intensity was so strong that even the faint sound of thunder appeared in the void. Start now. Marshal Sora didn't have too many polite words, just like his resolute and vigorous character in the past. The Ghost Spider, Captain Naval Headquarters. He said straightly. Exist. The Ghost Spider shook his whole body when he heard the words, subconsciously took a deep breath, and strode out of the military phalanx. Marshal Kong gave him a satisfied look and said in a deep voice. The Ghost Spider, a military school student, performed well in the defense of Marineford. He killed more than 20 pirates, captured more than 30 pirates alive, and named the Naval Headquarters Colonel. After graduation, he was stationed at the headquarters. After speaking, he raised his hand to the Ghost Spider and saluted him. The Ghost Spider's expression was stern, and a flash of joy flashed in the depths of his eyes. He replied with a military salute and said loudly. For justice. Marshal Kong took the upper correction cloak handed over by the guards and put on the Ghost Spider himself. Don't live up to the justice behind you. All the military academies under the stage saw the ghost spider walking back from the stage majestically into the queue, and their hearts were full of envy. Most of those who can enter the military academy are good seedlings with good talents. And those who can successfully graduate from the military academy have at least the level of a school-level officer in their department. The fighting power of Ghost Spider is naturally the same. He has successfully mastered the shave and iron body in Marine 6 styles, and his performance in the swordsmanship class is second to none, and has been recognized by Momosagi. But that's the case, and he was immediately promoted from captain to colonel in his head. This kind of rank rocket-like promotion speed is simply beyond the reach of others. Not just military academy students, seeing this award ceremony, every Marine in the headquarters and the major branches was jealous, flushed, and itchy. Fighting exploits is one thing. After all, Marineford has killed so many people in the defense of the battle. The reward for ghost spiders may seem exaggerated, but in fact it is reasonable. But this public award ceremony for the justice system of the entire world is the supreme honor and treatment that countless Marines have been looking forward to and admiring all their lives. Although the original intention of joining the army was not to get promoted and make a fortune, this great honor and affirmation is something that any soldier can enjoy. Guangzhong Yaozu, homecoming, but that's it. Thus, other military academies are also looking forward to it more and more. Captain Naval Headquarters Hu Shaoshan is out. After seeing the ghost spider return to the team, Sora also smiled and continued to announce the award list. I'm here. Huo Shaoshan walked out with a proud smile on his face. The ghost spider, a military school student, performed well in the defense of Marineford, killing more than 30 pirates, capturing more than 50 pirates alive, and sealing naval headquarters as a colonel. After graduation, he will be stationed at the headquarters. One by one, almost without exception, every military academy student present, under the gaze of countless Marines in the whole world, accepted the glory that belonged to them. And the most dazzling of them, naturally, they are the dazzling geniuses among the military academies in this period. Ghost Spiders, Hu Shaoshan, Mole Seal the Colonel. Hina and Smoker are appointed Lieutenant Colonel of the headquarters. There are also many majors who have been closed. In just a few minutes, in the mighty new military phalanx in the audience. Behind everyone was a white cloak of justice, like a seagull flag flying into the sky, looking spectacular, like a white arrogant Wang Yang. The high-level Marines on the stage looked at them with relief and smiles. Very well, next is our last person in this awarding ceremony. Marshal Kong coughed lightly, which caught everyone's attention. Believe, you all know, who is this last person, right? He smiled. Everyone present heard the words with knowing smiles on their faces, and they looked at the young man who stood silently at the end of the military phalanx. Not just them, countless spotlights quickly moved the focus to that young and tall figure. This moment, in the whole world, countless Marines from every corner of the sea. All subconsciously held their breath, put all their attention. They were all given to that boy. In their eyes. Without any jealousy or envy, there are and only purely taken for granted. For nothing else, because he is worth it. The most dazzling star in that magnificent and tragic war. A pair of expectant glances filled with smiles, Roy suddenly felt the boundless pressure. He smiled, thinking that he is still not used to standing in the spotlight. He raised his head subconsciously, greet you. It was Zephyr's hopeful look on the platform. Roy was taken aback, clenched his fists, and raised his chest. Yes, this is my glory. No matter what is waiting for me, I am ready. The tip of my knife, my fist, will always move forward. Never go back. Roy, Captain Naval Headquarters, get out. At this time, Marshal Kong sounded a solemn, low voice. Roy took a deep breath, exhaled it quickly, raised his head, and took a step forward. Exist, he said loudly. Roy stepped out and stepped onto the red carpet on the ground. With the sound of his footsteps, everyone present turned their bodies slightly to face him, and their eyes never left. At this moment, among all the Marines present, he was the only one wearing a simple military uniform, without the snow-white cloak representing the will for justice and peace. I don't know why, the moment everyone's eyes were cast on Roy, they couldn't move away anymore. Dump. Countless spotlights were projected all of a sudden, dragging Roy's tall and straight figure into a long shadow on the ground. Much attention. So handsome, really handsome. Many girls in the Marine crowd expressed their heartfelt emotions, and some of them were young girls with spring hearts, and stars appeared in their eyes. The deep eyes are filled with confidence and courage, as if glowing like a galaxy. The three-dimensional facial features are like a knife and axe, and the whole person exudes a unique and incomparable charm. His expression was calm, and the few faint scars on his cheeks did not reduce his strength, but added a bit of martial tension. He started to take steps, every time it's smooth. Very sure. The venue for the entire graduation ceremony suddenly became quiet. Only the rhythmic footsteps of the Marine boy slowly sounded. On the high platform, a group of Marine executives watched intently at the figure of the young man walking slowly. There are always some people, destined to be a dazzling morning star. Compared with the handsome custard niche when he first crossed, Roy, who has experienced the baptism of war and life and death at this moment, looks more mature and cold, and has an overwhelming momentum. What a nice look. Akainu looked at Roy deeply, and suddenly expressed such emotion. Aokiji next to him gave him a smile and joked slightly. Sakazuki, I didn't expect that someone like you would use these words to evaluate someone. Akainu ignored Aokiji's words, and a gleam of light flashed deep in his cold eyes. On the other side, with a slight smile on Momosagi's face, she whispered softly. You finally have a moment that belongs to you. Seeing Momosagi's never-before-seen expression, the T-dolphin on the side cursed inwardly. Cut, isn't it just a little more handsome and a better figure? At this moment, Garp. Zephyr suddenly shouted in a low voice. Garp by his side was taken aback for a moment, and turned his head subconsciously, but was stunned abruptly. He only saw Zephyr and didn't know when he had put on his pair of sunglasses. Under the sunglasses, 2 lines of tears slowly slid down his moderate cheek. You said, if he is still alive, he is probably about this old, right? Garp was dumbfounded, gritted his teeth, his eyes flushed slightly. Yes, if Zephyr's son were still alive, he would be almost Roy's age. He suddenly realized, why does Zephyr, a stubborn bastard, value Roy so much? Perhaps, he saw himself in his youth from Roy. I also saw the shadow of his son who died tragically in the hands of the pirate. People say that old things will be buried over time, but in fact this is wrong. Because of the past, it will always climb up naturally. The spotlight moved slowly, the eyes of the crowd are no different. The boy finally came to the high platform, looking at Marshal Kong firmly. His right hand was steadily as a rock and offered a military salute. Sora's eyes were full of undisguised appreciation, and he smiled and said, Roy, good job. Then, he waved his hand. Looking far into the crowd, loud voice. Roy, Captain Naval Headquarters and the 7th graduate of the Military Academy, performed well in the defense of Marineford. A total of the members of the Flying Pirates were killed. Among them, the captain of the 2nd squad of the Flying Pirates was killed on the spot, Flying Mantis Reed, to solve the war culprit that attacked Marineford, the great pirate Golden Lion Shiki. With one person, he reversed the war situation, inspired the military, and finally led the just Marine to a great victory in the war. After careful discussion by the top of Naval Headquarters, it was unanimously agreed that Captain Roy was promoted to Naval Headquarters Rear Admiral in an exceptional manner. In addition, recommended by the Military Academy Chief Instructor Zephyr, and the high-level leaders of the department unanimously agreed that Roy Rear Admiral is the 7th outstanding graduate of the Marine Academy. This order does not accept any refutation. At the same time, in order to demonstrate Roy Rear Admiral's courage and sturdiness in the defense of Marineford, the old man, in the name of Marine's Supreme Commander, Marshal Sora smiled heartily. Give him the Marine codename, Blue Tiger. Then he took a brand new cloak from the guard and put it on Roy himself. Huh. The bitter wind blows up, the white cloak of justice. Hunting behind Roy, roaring and dancing like a wild dragon. Above, the word justice in Long Fei Feng Wu is profound and eye-catching. On this day, Roy is named Blue Tiger under the eyes of everyone. The military rank directly exceeded the 3rd level. Joined the ranks of general officers and Marine high-level officers. The thunderous applause suddenly exploded, as if begging for a gust of wind and rain. Actually, named. On the high platform. Behind him, a white cloak of justice danced and fluttered with the wind. Roy held his head high, a confident smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, wantonly enjoying the glory that belonged to him at this moment. Marine Rear Admiral. This rank may seem to be very light for a Marine who killed the legendary great pirate Golden Lion Shiki. But in fact, Roy is already very satisfied. According to the training mechanism of the Military Academy, a qualified Military Academy graduate can hold the rank of captain as long as he graduates successfully, which can be counted as many times higher than the start of countless Marines. But the captain of the headquarters, far from the rank of Rear Admiral of the headquarters, there are 4 levels of Major, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, and Commodore. And especially the span between the Colonel and Commodore is a big hurdle that countless Marine officers can't cross in their entire lives. And Roy not only crossed this hurdle directly, but also jumped to the Rear Admiral sequence of the headquarters, barely stepping into the ranks of Marines' senior officers. This promotion speed is simply a rocket ride. Congratulations, Roy Rear Admiral. From today, you are a senior Marine officer. I hope you don't live up to the justice you shoulder. Marshal Kong smiled and said solemnly to Roy at this time, looking serious and saluting. Roy raised his hand in return and solemnly said, "Definitely live up to expectations." Marshal Sora laughed and turned to the Marine crowd and countless video phone bug cameras and said, "I believe everyone is very clear. According to the tradition of the military academy, every military academy graduates will select an outstanding graduate representative to give a public speech at the graduation ceremony of the military academy to encourage the military academy students in the same period. Successor." The voice fell. Countless Marines who were watching this graduation ceremony were all immediately shocked, staring attentively at the young man on the screen of the phone worm. They all studied and read On the Meaning of Effort by that young man, and they were deeply moved by the beautiful and simple writing and the positive and upward spiritual temperament in it. And now, the author of this article, the boy who killed the great pirate Golden Lion and saved the naval headquarters, stood in front of them all. Every one of them is looking forward to it. What kind of wonderful speech will this teenager give next? Then, let us welcome our 7th graduate representative of Marine College, Roy Rear Admiral, with warm applause. Kong raised one arm high, clasped tightly into the whole ground and said loudly, his expression excited. He said that he gave Roy a kind and encouraging look, and the figure stepped aside. Roy smiled and nodded, took the microphone from Marshal Sora's hand, moved slowly, and walked to the center of the high platform. The light of the projection lamp focused on him in all colors, and Yamato looked very tall and straight. The whole venue, the whole world, it seemed to be in silence at this moment. No matter it was anyone, they focused their eyes on the young man, with a smile on his mouth. Roy was holding the microphone in his hand, and in the quiet atmosphere, he could clearly hear his heartbeat gradually accelerating. This is a live broadcast for the entire world justice system. Rao, who has experienced so many things now, also feels a little nervous. He took a deep breath, looked up, looking far away. At this time, the blue sky in the distance was clear and transparent, as if it was broken at the touch of a touch. Strands of white clouds linger in it, and the golden sun shines brightly on the earth. The breeze swayed beside him, as if urging him forward. Roy suddenly laughed self-deprecatingly. I was a person who should have died long ago. When he spoke, everyone was stunned. What does it mean? Regardless of thinking about it, the young boy continued to sound with a low, slightly hoarse voice. As soon as the Marineford Defense War broke out, the military academy became the first target to fall. When I rushed to the military academy, it ushered in the crisis of death for the first time in my life. It was a Marine Vice Admiral who saved me. Everyone suddenly realized that Roy was talking about his being saved in the war. I didn't even know his name at the time. We have never met before, let alone have the slightest relationship. But he saved me anyway, then gave his precious life. Roy's deep voice slowly rippled through the microphone and loudspeakers in the venue, making everyone listening to this and Marine couldn't help but feel a sense of depression and sadness. Some people say that it is a man's honor to die in battle. Maybe, but I don't agree, Marine boy sighed. Because I personally met the family of Vice Admiral Toltim at the funeral. Yes, I finally found his name on the tombstone. It's ridiculous, isn't it? But it's true. His family is standing next to me, his biological father and daughter. Perhaps the old man and the little girl didn't understand all their lives. Why did their cutest son and most handsome dad stand up when they left? Who came back, but only had a cloak stained with blood? Everyone was silent. The bottomless silence. Yes, not only the working Marines present, but also the countless civilians living on Marineford who watched this graduation ceremony through the videophone worm screen, all sighed sadly. Red eyes. What they lost, but the most important relatives. Those soldiers who died in battle, Marineford Cemetery can't fit. There are countless soldiers sleeping in unknown corners of the world. I couldn't even bring back the complete bones. The last they greeted, it's just a military banner. Do you know? Roy, who had originally lowered his head, slowly raised his head, and his eye sockets had become moist. As I left the cemetery, the little girl asked me a question. Big brother, did Dad go to a very far and happy place? That's what she asked. I looked at her big, bright eyes, and I couldn't say anything for a while. It must be, that's how I answered. Then she smiled and said this to me. The big brother, when I grow up, I will become a great Marine. Roy smiled. I believe in her. I believe in her more than anyone else. I can definitely become a great Marine. The reality is really cruel. Someone will die in battle. Someone will be disabled. Someone will lose the love of their lives. Some people will be displaced. But there is always some will and some beliefs that will be passed down forever. That little girl may not be a genius, but this does not prevent her from having her own dreams. We will fail, we will fall, but with regard to the lives of all of us, neither you nor I are readers, but authors. At least this ending, you can still have the final say. It's like Tortum Vice Admiral. He has practiced his own way, shouldered the belief of his dreams, and passed this spirit to the next generation perfectly and well. The same is true of the education we received in the military academy. Really great education, the most important thing we learned in the military academy. Not Marine 6 styles, not a combat experience. It's not about world geography or military strategy. These are indeed very important, but it is far less important than the belief and what we have learned here. Go hard, my comrades in arms. You are not bad, you are just too eager to achieve success. Just after reading a few pages, I began to wonder whether reading is useful at all. If I insisted on training for less than a few days, I complained that I was too bitter, too tired, I didn't improve my strength and planned to give up. We graduated, and we should understand, there is no shortcut that can make you do it overnight. No matter whether it is smooth or rough in life. All will contribute to your growth. Do anything, be steadfast, do one thing as one thing. Everything you want will eventually come as expected. Don't complain, but act. Roy slowly raised his head. Keep your head tall. The voice gradually became agitated and high-pitched. Like a silver screen blasting a sharp ship to break the ice. If you think your hometown is not good, then build it. If you think Marine is not good, you should try to change it. If you feel that people in this world are already terrible, then be a gentle and responsible person. If you think that the society is too dark and the army is corrupt, then you should eliminate it and change the status quo. Instead of blindly complaining about how unfair the world is and how powerless I am. As Marine, where you stand is the territory of justice. Just as you are, justice is what the world is like. Roy clenched his fists and held them up high. May all the Marine youths can go up without listening to the words of despondence and others. Do things that can do things, make a sound that can be vocal. There is a bit of heat, a bit of light, like a firefly, a bit of light in the dark, no need to wait for the torch. When the voice fell, everyone was instantly moved, and their hearts were shaken. All the Marines who watched this scene screamed wildly in their hearts and clenched their fists. Garp and Zephyr gasped with crimson eyes. Marshal Sora and Vice Admiral glanced at each other, and they both saw the shock and smile in each other's eyes. Then, Roy slammed a fist into the void, just feeling a dull breath in his chest, wanting to pour out all of it, not spit out. Boom. The light blue airwaves are rushing like flowing water, winding and sweeping like a waterfall, majestic and overbearing. He said the last sentence in this speech, a word that shocked the whole world's righteous power. If there is no torch from now on, I will be the only light. Next moment, the mighty momentum, it broke out from the unyielding young man who stood upright like a battle flag. At the same time, the entire naval headquarters Marineford. Thousands of seagulls' battle flags soared into the sky, whistling for glory. Conqueror's hockey, awaken. The harsh wind and waves abruptly. Like an invisible storm, from the seemingly thin body of the Marine boy, he burst out. Constantly slapped the hearts of everyone present. The pupils of Garp and Zephyr suddenly shrank, and couldn't help but breathe in a cold breath, and there was an indescribable shock in their hearts. Conqueror's hockey. Roy actually awakened. Garp subconsciously turned his head to look at Zephyr, his eyes flashing with worry. Conqueror's hockey is not something anyone can own. Perhaps this kind of innate courage is a common meal for the big pirates who are lawless in New World. But this kind of king's aptitude and courage are rare in the world in the Marine system. The awakening of Conqueror's hockey has nothing to do with personal talent. That is a proof of aptitude and vision. Even the three of Akainu, Aokiji and Kizaru, who have the title of monster in the military, have not awakened their own Conqueror's hockey. As a soldier constrained by military orders, how could it be possible? How should there be such a rebellious spirit as Conqueror's hockey? It's probably a bit troublesome now. In Garp's heart, Chunin couldn't help but come up with such a thought. Who have the same idea, not just him, the same goes for Kong and Sengoku next to them. The smiles on their faces have now all disappeared, replaced by bottomless dignity and worry. Am I the only light? What a great leadership temperament. Marshal Sora frowned tightly, muttering to himself with emotion in his heart. This matter. Marshal Kong, I guess I can't help it. Sengoku next to him suddenly lowered his voice and smiled bitterly. Kong nodded and sighed. No way, please report according to the normal process. After all, no one thought that Roy would have such grand ambitions. With that said, he took a deep look at Sengoku and Garp in front of him, and shook his head slightly. In Marine, except for Roy who had just awakened in front of him, only Garp and Sengoku had awakened their conqueror's haki. Even Marshal Marine, himself, didn't have this kind of courage. But Roy is obviously different from Sengoku and Garp. Sengoku implements Kun justice in the world, and has firmly believed in government orders from a young age. To climb to the current position because of the reliable completion of the task, for those who doubt the government, even their companions will become the target of attack, that kind of loyalty is quite high. In countless wars and disputes in the past, Sengoku did not hesitate to stand on the side of the government. Because of this, the world government has no doubts about Sengoku who has awakened Conqueror's haki. The guy Garp is notoriously not ambitious, and has rejected the opportunity to be promoted to admiral countless times, so the senior government officials are also very relieved of Garp. But Roy in front of you. Marshal Kong looked at Roy, who was bursting with amazing aura, and couldn't help looking at Zephyr, who looked very excited from a distance. He couldn't help but press his lips tightly, his fists clenched very tightly. This grand graduation ceremony came to an end under Roy's speech that shocked the world in his powerful explosion of Conqueror's haki. But what Roy didn't know was, because Conqueror's haki, who was awakened by accident, forcibly reversed his promising bright future and embarked on a rather bumpy road. The next day, Roy, as always, trains in self-discipline on the school field. Sweat like rain, a clear trace was condensed under his feet. The school grounds are full of graduated military academies. Everyone is gritting their teeth and trying to improve their own strength. This has become a landscape of Naval Headquarters Marineford. I don't know when it started, almost all military academies have lived a boring life like Roy. They will show up on the training ground at 4 o'clock in the morning, and in the middle of the night will pick up textbooks that they didn't pay much attention to before and read them at night. Perhaps this is the power of role models and idols. Roy Rear Admiral, I like you. A green voice suddenly sounded on the training ground. Roy looked at the Marine girl with a double ponytail in front of him with some helplessness, and said in distress. Well, you are a good person, but we are not suitable. After speaking, he seemed to be afraid of hurting the girl's self-esteem, and quickly added. Thank you. The girl was taken aback, not too upset, just smiled brightly, and then ran away. Smoker and others next to him have long been accustomed to seeing this scene, they just smiled and said. How many are these today? The mole smiled slyly. The 6th one. The ghost spider shook his head and said. It's really exaggerated. After experiencing that magnificent graduation ceremony, Roy has completely become the dream lover of Marineford and countless girls in the world. Handsome, good body shape, responsible, motivated, high position weight, the future is unlimited. Powerful. No matter where the advantages are released, it is allure. But it was all concentrated on him alone. As for the 6th one, they said, it was only a personal confession and a secret love letter, which almost filled Roy's doorway. Marine male god, but so. Smoker chuckles while biting his cigar. Smoker, don't speak too loudly, otherwise Hina will hang you up and beat you up. Mole smiled narrowly. Smoker's head suddenly shrank, and he almost swallowed the smoke from the cigar in one bite. After choking a few times, he sneaked toward the shadow in another corner of the training field. After discovering that the latter did not pay attention to himself, Smoker patted his chest and breathed a sigh of relief, and said angrily. Mole, you bastard. You scared me to death. The others burst into laughter suddenly. On the other side, Hina looked at the girls walking away with sullen eyes, her teeth tickling with hatred, her teeth biting her red lips tightly. Roy, this bastard, is too popular. Hina couldn't help stomping her feet, but she couldn't help but prick her ears. But Roy, are you sure you are a serious man? So many chicks confess to you, are you not satisfied? Mole put down the saber in his hand, lit a cigarette to himself, winked at Roy and smiled. He has no plans to send cigarettes. Smoker doesn't smoke cigarettes, just likes to smoke cigars. Ghost spiders don't smoke either. As for Roy, if this lunatic who is too self-disciplined and drinking only hot water smokes a cigarette one day, it is probably going to be the opposite. Yes, I think the one in the morning is pretty good. If Huo Xiao Shan smiled and said, the nurse from the military medical department, I heard before that he took care of you when you were injured. It seems to understand and take care of others, and is very careful. As he talked, he got more and more excited as he talked, an impulse to help Roy get out of the order. Sure enough, the guys with girls are different, so please play hard. Roy looked at the group of guys who made fun of him speechlessly. To be honest, he didn't expect that he was so popular, and he even issued a lot of good people cards. People are nice, but they don't suit me. Roy didn't know what to say, so he replied. Then what type do you like? I will show you what you like. Hugh Shaoshan vigorously authentic. The others couldn't help but look at Roy. They are very curious. What kind of girl would Roy like? A good person? Hina in the distance put her ears up high, and her eager look was almost awakening observation hockey. Roy thought for a while. There is no clear standard either. If you have to say something. He paused, then suddenly smiled. I like me to kill and set me on fire. Everyone was taken aback, and then burst into laughter at the same time. At this moment, a figure hurriedly ran from not far away. Report Roy Rear Admiral. It was a messenger who hurriedly ran in front of Roy and respectfully saluted him in a loud voice. Roy responded and nodded. What's matter? The messenger said in a deep voice. Marshal Empty ordered, please go to the Marshal's mansion for Roy Rear Admiral. Everyone was stunned subconsciously after hearing the words. Roy frowned and said, I see, I'll be there later. The messenger immediately bowed and left towards Roy. Do you know what it is? As soon as the messenger left, the ghost spider asked calmly. Marshal Sora's command. This is really strange. Even if Roy is now Rear Admiral in the headquarters, it is impossible to have any direct communication relationship with Marshal Marine in terms of authority. The doubts arose in their hearts, and everyone else couldn't help looking at Roy. Roy shook his head. I don't know, let's go first. As he said that, he began to pack things, and his figure flickered and disappeared in place. Ghost Spider and the others didn't think much about it, and once again invested in their respective duels. On the training ground, there were bursts of fierce shouting and killing, which kept ringing. Naval Headquarters Marineford. Marshal's Mansion. Tuck tuck. Roy put on a clean military uniform and knocked gently on the door. Immediately afterwards, Marshal Sora's low voice came from the Marshal's mansion. Come in. Roy pushed the door and walked in. But at the moment of stepping into the Marshal's mansion, he was stunned immediately, because of the presence. Not only Marine Marshal Kong, Teacher Zephyr, Sengoku Admiral and Staff Crane were all present. Roy felt a little uneasy in his heart and saluted. Naval Headquarters Rear Admiral Roy met Marshal Sengoku, Sengoku Admiral, Teacher Zephyr, and Staff Crane. Everyone's faces were not pretty, and they nodded slightly towards Roy. Sit down first, Roy. Marshal Sora stood up from the main seat and motioned for Roy to sit down. Roy waved his hand. No need, Marshal Kong, is there any order for me to come over this time? Marshal Sora looked at Roy, then quickly looked at the others, and then handed Roy a military document. Look at it first. Roy looked at the complicated expressions of everyone, took the military document, and opened it to read it quickly. The Marshal's office suddenly became extremely quiet. It's weirdly quiet, only the voice of Roy flipping through the file rang. After a while, Roy raised his head solemnly, tightened his eyebrows, and said solemnly. So, Marshal Sora wants me to take over this top-secret mission? Looking at Roy's eyes quietly, he sighed softly. Yes. Roy's eyelids drooped. Unexpectedly, this task finally fell into his own hands. Is this a temptation? The strange feeling of anxiety in his heart grew stronger. Because this time the mission is, arrest Marine Trader Vice Admiral Saul. Saul, formerly Naval Headquarters Vice Admiral, a powerful giant warrior. Because of defying the secret instructions of Marine's highest decision-making level, questioning Marine's justice and orders, betraying Marine and protecting prisoner Nicole Orovia. In response to Saul's behavior, Naval Headquarters decided to completely deprive its Marine Vice Admiral of the power and military rank. Marshal Sora's voice was full of meaning and indescribable complexity, and his eyes were filled with bottomless solemnity. He slowly turned around, the thick, burly figure that seemed to be able to support the weight of the mountain, with his back facing Roy and his hands behind him. The voice continued deep. Roy Rear Admiral, your mission this time is to arrest the traitor Saul. If you encounter a strong counterattack, the old man will give you enough authority in the name of Marine's Supreme Commander, and you can kill him on the spot. In addition, the scholar named Nicole Orovia in the military document tried to find evidence to overthrow the world government. She is a major criminal wanted by the world government and our naval headquarters for many years. For this person, the old man hopes that you will deal with it according to the actual situation. The first goal is to capture him alive, and try to find out from her mouth how much information the master has in her hands. She's just an ordinary person and doesn't have any fighting ability. If she refuses to say, based on the current situation, you should first bring her back to the headquarters to be monitored by our interrogation department. The above is the goal of your mission this time, do you understand? Roy was silent. He quietly looked at the military document with the top secret watermark in his hand, then raised his head and glanced at the others. Marshal Sengoku, Sengoku Admiral, and the Suru staff were all still, and in the deadly atmosphere, it seemed that even the plants in the corners seemed to be condensed. Only Zephyr's face was embarrassed and his expression was extremely complex. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but was finally locked in his eyes by Sengoku Admiral next to him. Roy took a deep breath, as if the air had become icy, his teeth trembling slightly. Marshal Kong, I'm sorry. I can't complete this task. His voice was dark and hoarse, sinking all the time. The empty figure paused. Why? This is just a very ordinary task. The difficulty of the task is actually not high. With your strength in the defense of Marineford, it should not be too dangerous to deal with a Marine trader vice admiral and an ordinary person. This military document has listed Saul's personality, special appearance, good physical skills and weapons, etc., and a series of information are listed in detail, even including his escape route and possible emergencies. The General Staff has made speculations about the location and orientation. All you need to do is follow the instructions above, find him, then defeat and arrest him. Roy asked in a deep voice. Since this task is so simple, why do you have to cross several military classes to give me orders? Why not let the other vice admiral in this department handle it? He straightened his body slowly, and he had a faint feeling of tit for tat with Marine Yuan. For a while, the atmosphere was suppressed in Ultimate's Marshal's office. Boom. At this time, somehow the sky outside the window suddenly exploded with an astonishing thunder. In the flickering light, the faces in this office are incredibly deep. No, this is your task. Except for you, no one else is qualified to complete it. Marshal Kong slowly turned around, his eyes deep and thick as a mighty stone, pressing Roy firmly. For this task, the old man does not accept any rejection. Roy Rear Admiral, you are no longer a wayward military academy. You are now an official soldier. And the first thing you have to understand is that as a soldier, you must obey the guidance of your superiors. No matter what order it is, it must be obeyed perfectly. No matter what kind of task it is, it must be performed unconditionally. Roy couldn't speak anymore. The faint feeling of anxiety in my heart finally became reality. This mission is indeed a temptation. Test whether His Headquarters Rear Admiral Roy will unconditionally obey orders from Marine and even the world government. Can he refuse? Impossible, he wanted to refuse. Because this is a road with no exit. As a traverser and familiar with the plot, he knows exactly what the so-called traitor Vice Admiral, Saul in this military document really is. He also understood that Saul was just an introduction. Soon, it won't take long, that brutal O'Hara Buster call will start. Countless civilians and scholars will be wiped out overnight. And for myself, Naval Headquarters and, do not. Perhaps it should be more accurate to say, the world government just wanted to take advantage of this incident to test it out. 3 days later. The sea is endless, but it is muddy, clear and blue as before. A warship flying the seagull flag, sailing fast on the turbulent sea. The storm is coming. The pitch-black cloud covered the whole world like a kabuto hat, but left a thin trace of light over a looming island far away. Standing on the deck of the bow in a military uniform, Roy looked at the gray sea in front of him. He suddenly realized that this was the first time he had gone to sea since crossing. He didn't know what was waiting for him ahead. The masts and sails trembled crazily under the slap of the wind, and the deck underneath also creaked and squeaked. Scattered birds are crying in the sky. What do you think? A low and solemn voice sounded behind him. It was the ghost spider. Roy just shook his head, his eyebrows tightened, but he didn't say anything. The ghost spider pursed his lips, looking at Roy in front of him, wearing the Rear Admiral rank cape. He didn't know why, but he couldn't help but feel worried. He had never seen Roy show such a side, in his impression. Roy is a man with a smile on his face forever. No matter what kind of difficulties you face, even if your opponent is the legendary big pirate who crosses New World, you will face the difficulties and laugh wildly. But now, the ghost spider clenched his fist. Although I don't know what kind of orders and tasks the top executives of this department have given you, but... He gritted his teeth, his eyes flashed with determination. If you need me to stay, even if you don't want to pull off this uniform, I will be fine. Roy was taken aback when he heard the words, and turned around subconsciously. He looked at the resolute and determined ghost spider with a calm look in his eyes, and a warm current rushed into his heart. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, don't you still know my strength? As long as you don't meet the big pirates of New World, there will be no life-threatening. This is West Blue, I will be fine." Listening to Roy's words that seemed to comfort himself but were actually comforting himself, the ghost spider spoke silently in his heart. He didn't say much. The tacit understanding between men is often simple and direct, and it is impossible to force it. The ghost spider made a tactical gesture towards the observation deck of the warship. Following his order, the speed of the warship slowed down and stopped completely after a few breaths. In that case, I will send it to you, the ghost spider said solemnly. Roy laughed. Enough is enough. If you move forward, you will startle the snake. You go back. Be careful on the way back. After all, there are still days away from West Blue on the way back to the headquarters. After speaking, Roy's body surface gradually lingered like a blue flame-like airwave, leaping from the bow of the ship. As if walking on the ground, his figure turned into a blue phantom light and stepped on the sea, whizzing towards the deserted island in the distance. The ghost spider that stayed in place quietly looked at Roy's distant figure and suddenly shouted. Come back safely. Lousy is waiting for you to drink at the headquarters. There is no echo. Landing. This is an unnamed desert island. According to the analysis of Saul's escape route by the headquarters staff, Saul is very likely to stay for a short time in this necessary place on the path to O'Hara. On the deserted island, the first thing that catches your eyes is the towering giant trees that are dense like shadows. The intertwining of vines and huge tree roots makes everything in front of you look very gloomy. Roy quickly glanced at the long coastline, and suddenly found a dilapidated marine battleship on the distant coastline. Is it really here? A thought flashed in his mind. He paused subconsciously, then took a deep breath. In my mind, I recalled what the old man Zephyr had said to me before I set off. This mission is absolutely confidential. The O'Hara scholar Nicole Orovia is secretly researching and unearthing the remains of the historical text, and the historical text hides a shocking secret that can overthrow the world government. Saul is also a disciple of the old man. The old man is very clear that he is absolutely impossible to betray Marine's justice. Behind this matter, there may be other difficulties. This matter was originally planned by the senior officials of the ministry to let Kuzan handle it, but for some reason, the world government asked you to go by name. To be honest, the reason behind this, the old man speculates, is probably because you successfully awakened Conqueror's Haki at the graduation ceremony. Conqueror's Haki in Marine. The king of Marine. In addition, you also beheaded the Golden Lion. If you can't tolerate the government guys, don't worry, 5 elders probably won't be able to sit still. So this is a temptation. The old man does not want to hinder your will and choices, but you have to remember that no matter what you make, no matter what happens, the old man will do his best to support you. Zephyr's melancholy old face was constantly flashing and emerging in his mind. Roy clenched his fists subconsciously. He was keenly aware of the dignity and gloom in Zephyr's voice. This extremely stubborn old man is worried about himself. No matter which world you live in, there is always some decisiveness. There are always options, there is always some way. I have to go alone. These decisions, choices, and paths may have nothing to do with life or death, but they are crucial. The lead cloud hangs low, thunderbursts. The thick dark clouds pressing down on the earth, like a black city wall about to collapse, are so hard that Roy can't breathe. Tick, the first drop of rain fell from the sky. Then came the cold rain. He slapped his cheeks precariously. Roy shrank his head subconsciously. Nowhere to avoid. He took heavy steps towards the deep jungle. The black jungle that seemed to cover the sky and the sun, in the wind and rain at this moment, was like the mouth of an invisible beast, gradually swallowing his thin figure in. Boom. In the Naval Headquarters Marineford Marshal's mansion, a desk made of high-grade mahogany was lifted abruptly, flew out and hit the wall hard, turning it into countless pieces. Empty old man. Why? Zephyr's eyes were red and panting, roaring angrily at Marine Marshal Kong in front of him. The murderous intent from his body almost swept this huge office into a terrible storm. The atmosphere was extremely suppressed. You know that such a task is very likely to destroy a person. Why send Roy to execute? Zephyr couldn't accept it at all, and slammed his fist against the solid wall, leaving a deep fist mark on it. Outside the gate of the marshal's mansion, several soldiers in charge of the guards bowed their heads pale, watching their noses, and they were so frightened that they did not dare to take a breath. Marshal Kong, sitting on the main seat, calmly looked at Zephyr, who was flushed with rage in front of him, raised his hand and took a sip of the coffee in front of him. Please speak. Isn't it very strong when I gave the order? Zephyr saw Kong's unmoved look. His eyes and pupils were suddenly filled with bloodshot eyes, and he roared. Sora put down the cup in his hand and slowly lit a cigar. Is there enough trouble? He suddenly spoke. The voice was low and cold. Zephyr was taken aback. Zephyr, you are also the Marine who has experienced decades of strong winds and waves. You should be very clear that this time the mission is not something that the Martial Marine of the old man can stop. Kong raised a finger and pointed it towards the top of his head, and said coldly. This is an order from the top government. Do you think the old man doesn't know the mission this time? It is very likely to destroy Roy's faith and determination in justice. What he will face is the fight of his fellow rogue. Snapped. Kong suddenly slapped the table hard and stood up. But this is an order. You know better than anyone how much influence your student Roy has in the marine system of the whole world now. Look at the pile of application documents on this desk, old man. Every day there are hundreds of application documents from major branches, and I want to invite Roy to their branches for communication and guidance. Look at the current Marineford again. Every day at 4 o'clock in the morning, not only the 7th graduates of the original military academy, but also countless Marines from civilian areas and headquarters, all spontaneously show up on the training ground to train. Countless young Marines regard him as an idol and a role model for learning. Countless civilians want to join the army because of his deeds and words, and become a member of Marine. A self-disciplined Roy is nothing. A Marine Rear Admiral who killed the great pirate Golden Lion is nothing. A young man who has awakened conquerors hockey is nothing more. But Kong had a rare temper and yelled irritably. The combination of these three is an object that even World Government 5 elders feels jealous of. Should you not understand? It's all this time. In the eyes of the world government, the purpose of our Marine's existence is to serve them from the day it was established. Absolute justice? Where is there any absolute point in this ocean? Can Marine exist independently from the support of the world government? All they need is a group of violent law enforcement agencies that can help them govern this sea and maintain their rule. Under absolute power, even the old man, Marshal Marine, has to swallow his breath. Not to mention Roy, a Marine Rear Admiral. Marshal Sora's words sounded like a sword, forcing Zephyr's face to turn pale, and he couldn't help staggering back. The old man has nothing to do with this matter. Think about it for yourself. Seeing Zephyr's desperate look, Marshal Sora sighed in his heart and strode open the door of the office to leave. Zephyr's eyes were reddish, staring blankly at the door that was tightly closed with a bang, motionless. Just stood there for several hours. Desert island, deep. A bonfire is rising under a leaf canopy woven by hand. Wisps of gunpowder smoke, the pulsating fire. It seems to be isolated from the coldness of the rain outside. Two figures, one big and one small, one man and one woman. Sitting on the mud, holding his knees with his hands. He stared at the flame in front of him in a daze, and his body trembled slightly. None of them spoke, both their faces and bodies were stained with dry bloodline. The dusty face is full of exhaustion that cannot be removed. Do you think I still have a chance to return to Ohara? At a certain moment, the woman with white hair made a husky, low voice. Her voice is very low, it seems to be asking another person, and it seems to be just talking to himself in a daze. She is very beautiful, her light blue eyes glowing with deep and full of wisdom. Even if a shallow scar fell on her face because of the previous battle, it did not diminish her demeanor. While talking, she tilted her head and looked at the darkest part of the jungle, stunned. Alone, pale face, looking forward feebly. As if there was her final destination. What are you talking about, Orovia? Saul will definitely take you home. In addition, the man forced a far-fetched smile on his face, and he let out a weird, hee loudly. His body is huge, and his height of nearly 20 meters looks like a majestic mountain. The appearance is simple and thick and the figure is stocky, half of his face is covered with a red beard like a lion cub. But such a rough man, his eyes were very gentle, unlike the rumored violent giants. While saying this, Saul also deliberately raised his arm, which was as thick as a heavy gun, and squeezed his muscles to show that he was strong. The white-haired woman named Nicole Orovia smiled bitterly. Saul was obviously injured. That specially made Vice Admiral uniform has been stained with bleak bloodline, and it seems that the entire jungle has a faint smell of blood under the wash of rain. There were 34 people in his expedition fleet, and he was ambushed by Marine on the way. All 33 people who were traveling with her died, and she herself was imprisoned. If it wasn't for Marine who wanted to obtain information from her own mouth, she would have already become a corpse floating somewhere in the sea, just like other partners. It was the Marine Vice Admiral in front of her who saved her. Jaguar D. Saul, this is his name. The legendary D family, I didn't expect that I would actually meet one in my life. Saul is very strong. Even with her tow oil bottle, she successfully sank several Marine battleships, broke through the encirclement and escaped from the fleet of hundreds of people. Along the way, after receiving orders to pursue their Marine fleet one after another, Saul repelled them time and time again. Ohara is getting closer, but the inexplicable fear in Orovia's heart is getting stronger and stronger. In the last 2 days, there has been no pursuit by the Marine fleet. But it is this strange peace, it made Orovia more unspeakable anxiety. With the secrets and intelligence of the master in his own hands, Marine will never give up. Then there is only one conclusion. The next thing they face will be a powerful opponent sent by naval headquarters. In order to ensure the completion of the mission, Marine will definitely send a stronger presence than Saul. So, by that time, Saul, who has been seriously injured, can really continue to protect himself. Thinking like this, Orovia felt the despair and despair. She never felt my intelligent mind and powerful reasoning ability are so annoying. Even if I'm a little more naive and stupid, maybe there is still a little bit of hope in my heart. Orovia's eyes dimmed. Or, run away by yourself. Marine's goal is only me. Even if you defect to Marine, they won't kill you all. On your own terms, you can definitely escape and survive. She suddenly raised her head and gritted her teeth toward Saul. Saul was stunned. His figure is too exaggerated, and the temporary woven canopy can't cover his head at all. Half of his body was wet by the rain. When he heard these words, his face suddenly turned pale. Do not. Saul paused, then suddenly roared in a low voice. Orovia, I can't just watch you die. Marine definitely did something wrong this time. His voice stopped abruptly. The huge body like a mountain shook, and a large stretch of muscles tightened. It looks like the volcanic magma that is about to erupt, and it has a hideous shape. He turned his head stiffly and looked into the depths of the jungle. Orovia also seemed to realize something. Her face turned pale, not bloody. A thin, ant-like figure, completely disproportionate to Saul, walked out of the darkness slowly. Unexpectedly, they sent it to you. There was a mocking and bitter smile on Saul's face. Boom. At this time, a deafening thunder exploded over the jungle, and the hot lightning tore open the dark curtain. The wind is more urgent. Torrential rain is more intense. Light and darkness in the jungle, bonfire and rain. The young figure loomed loomingly, cold face. Eyes dazzling like stars, upright body, the snow-white cloak of justice behind was drooping heavily in the cold rain. Naval Headquarters Rear Admiral. Seeing that too young face, Orovia subconsciously exclaimed. They waited for several days. Even Marine's fleet has disappeared for such a long time. Marineford sent to hunt down their Marine. There is only one Headquarters Rear Admiral. Although Orovia was obscured by the rain, Orovia, who studied the history of the Grand Master, recognized the epaulets on Roy's shoulders that represented the military rank for the first time. Orovia, don't underestimate this trivial Naval Headquarters Rear Admiral. Saul's face was full of indescribable bitterness. The rain wet his eyes, making them red and stinging, but he didn't even dare to blink. As the former Naval Headquarters Vice Admiral, he is very clear about the command flow within Marine. Although Orovia is a wanted criminal in the world government, she alone does not mean that Naval Headquarters will send an admiral to hunt down. After all, the current Marine Admiral, known as the world government's highest combat force, is only Sengoku. And the other Vice Admiral Saul in this department are very familiar. As long as the three monsters don't take action. Even if 2 or 3 Vice Admiral came at the same time, Saul was confident enough. This is the foundation of the giants. As the strongest race on the land, the giant warriors who are born with powerful physique and terrifying power can crush opponents of the same level. But what even he didn't expect was that it was Roy, a new star in the military academy, who came to perform the task this time, and the new Rear Admiral. This boy is Roy. The Roy who killed the legendary great pirate Golden Lion Shaki under the eyes of everyone in the Marineford defense battle. The blue tiger of Naval Headquarters, the self-disciplined lunatic. Roy. Saul said solemnly in a solemn tone. He knew that this time he was probably not lucky enough. Orovia's face froze upon hearing this. When the defense of Marineford broke out, she followed the expedition to excavate in an uninhabited country of ruins. Later, the entire adventure team was ambushed by Marine, and all the others were killed. She was also imprisoned in the cabin of the warship. Being closely monitored and imprisoned, she did not have any channels to receive a small amount of information about the outside world. She had only heard the name Roy from the Marine soldiers who took care of her. It's just that she never expected the rumored blue tiger. So young, he came to hunt them down. To be honest, Saul, I didn't expect that I would be sent on this mission. The faint voice, without the slightest emotion, was slowly rippling in the rain curtain. Roy slowly raised his head, glanced quickly at Saul and Orovia, the two mission targets, and finally locked his gaze on Saul. He has successfully awakened observation Haki in the defense of Marineford. But at this time, no need for the breath perception of observation Haki at all. Just distinguish with the naked eye, Roy can see that Saul has been seriously injured. It can be seen that even if Saul's strength is beyond the general headquarters of Vice Admiral, a large number of masters are exhausted under Marine's frantic pursuit. This task is simply not difficult at all, but because it is not difficult, it makes Roy more irritable. Even if you don't know it, but he knows the inside story behind this. Saul was taken aback, then smiled bitterly. "Ms. Zephyr, is it okay?" he asked. Roy paused. The old man is very good and in good spirits. "However, are you sure that delaying time like this will work for me?" The moment the voice fell, Orovia was taken aback. Immediately in front of him, there was a round of spinning, and the surrounding environment was moving away from him at an astonishing speed. "Do not." Orovia's eyes turned red. Saul, who threw Orovia out with a soft hand, let out a roar in despair. "Orovia, you go out to sea. I will stop this guy. Hurry home. Since the headquarters has sent Roy, it is estimated that no other Marine will hunt you down. Hurry up and inform your compatriots. The voice hasn't fallen yet." He turned around outrageously. That fist that was like a small mountain peak, like a huge meteorite, slammed down towards Roy. Roy's pupils shrank. With Saul's posture, he completely gave up his defense, even wanting to change his life. With his life, change Orovia a way of escape. How terrible is the power of the giants? Roy had never imagined it before. In the memory of his mind, regarding the giants, known as the strongest races on the land, on this sea. In the original plot, they all seem to be ants that are killed in seconds as soon as they appear. Just to bring out the profiling of those masters' powerful combat power. The 8-year-old Big Mom Charlotte Linlin can easily slaughter a giant village. The elderly and seriously ill Whitebeard easily punched Vice Admiral, a giant of Marine. The captain of the Whitebeard Pirates Squadron Oz Jr. was killed by Doflamingo and Moria with a casual blow. But in fact, are giant warriors really weak? Roy felt the gust of wind rushing towards his face, and in his heart he wished to curse Oda at 9 streets. This is the same as Golden Lion and other theatrical characters. It is a fairy character who plays against other people in seconds, but against Luffy, he can't even use Haki. But Roy is not Luffy, he also doesn't have the so-called protagonist aura. He only has himself. This moment, the boundless and majestic waves of air squeezed the air from the top of the head, making a deafening roar. 8 Inner Gate's 4th gate, open the door. Boom. Almost without hesitation, the moment Roy took Saul's shot, his body spontaneously reacted and directly opened the 4th gate of the 8 inner gates. Vigorous green waves lingered from the surface of his body, like a raging flame. Deep breath, accompanied by his gradual red body skin and eyes bursting with amazing red glow, he unscrupulously vented out, causing the ground under his feet to crack inch by inch. Whoosh. While the muscles of the legs were tense, they exploded at an astonishing speed. But in the blink of an eye, Roy was missing from Saul's sight, and the missed punch hit the ground heavily. Rumble. The earth-shaking roar followed. Unimaginable amazing power and violent Haki wrapped around his fist. Roy's original location was blasted out of a huge shocking hole. Hurricane-like airwaves swarmed across the ground, uprooting huge towering ancient trees one after another, and the soil rolled like waves. From a distance, the entire gloomy jungle was actually hit by Saul's extremely angry punch with a huge dent several meters long. One punch failed, and Saul was stunned, his red pupils suddenly shrank, and he turned around suddenly. "Do not. Orovia, go out to sea, get on board." He shouted hoarsely at the white-haired woman who was tumbling and soiled in the distance. Said that he actually threw his fist to his side again. Roy's figure suddenly appeared there, and disappeared strangely. Avoided his attack again. Although the strength and physique of the giants are powerful, it is a brutal siege weapon when placed on a large-scale battlefield. But in terms of flexibility and speed, it is relatively clumsy. Boom. There was another loud noise, the ground beneath his feet seemed to be crumbling. Orovia heard Saul's roar, ignoring the pain of the abrasions on her body, struggling with her hands and feet from the muddy ground, and rushing toward the coastline with a hasty look. A distance of 50 meters. As long as you board the boat yourself, you will be able to get out of it in an instant under such strong winds and waves. A line of muddy and bloody tears overflowed from Orovia's eye sockets, and then instantly penetrated into the rain in the sky. Orovia, who was wet by the rain, felt the icy cold, extremely biting. This kind of cold, not the coldness of the rain outside the body. It is the despair and pain emanating from the deepest part of my heart. She had never seen Saul show such a tragic expression. Even if they had been chased by a fleet of warships before, Saul looked relaxed and let out the strange laughter of hee 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 hee. But now, there was fear in Saul's tone, as you can imagine. That overly young man, in his eyes, what a terrifying existence it is. But how is this possible? Isn't that boy a freshman who just graduated from the military academy? He is not a monster like Akainu, Aokiji and Kizaru. But Orovia couldn't think of so much now. Saul has already made up his mind. If he hesitates here anymore, his efforts and determination will be wasted in vain. Go back to Ohara alive. Marine's force is estimated to have set off for Ohara. You must be in time to go back and notify the others so that they can escape quickly. Otherwise, the entire Ohara will usher in an unimaginable catastrophe. Run. Orovia seems to have exhausted his life's strength in running. Step by step, it became unusually heavy in the wind and rain, and his feet seemed to be filled with lead. 30 meters. 20 meters, getting closer. Orovia's dim eyes gradually burst into light. I will be able to catch up, go back alive. Just notify the islanders of Ohara and, even if she died after that. It's no hesitate to be buried with Saul, boom. The huge fists entwining Hockey's airwave roared down, and a terrible airwave broke out. The trees were ruthlessly destroyed and collapsed. The rain is stronger. Void, a figure surrounded by green airwaves shuttled like a phantom, evading the fist that could easily destroy a small mountain. In the rain curtain of the downpour, Saul, with his eyes full of scarlet red, is like a violent beast, launching crazy attacks on Roy again and again. The huge body was ruining everything that blocked his way in the big wooded jungle, which looked terrifying. One small, one large and two large-scale figures were chasing frantically in the jungle. Roy, can't you let her make a living? She is just a civilian. Behind all this is questionable. Don't you ever think about what is behind the headquarters order to you? Orovia is just an ordinary person, she just wants to discover the truth of history. Saul's eyes overflowed with blood-red tears, his huge rocky body, the wounds left by the previous battles opened again, full of blood, as if even the heavy rain couldn't wash it clean. But no matter how he shouted, the figure did not give any response. Saul's eyes became redder. Roy, do you have to drive her to a dead end? Is this the justice teacher Zephyr taught you? Is this the justice and light you seek? Didn't you say that you are the only light? Suddenly, Saul was stunned. A green light flashed before his eyes. Boom. His huge body suddenly bent over, like a cooked shrimp. A burst of blood spilled from his mouth, and bursts of pain in his abdomen poured out frantically. So Saul, it's me instead of you, what can you do? Roy's voice came from under his feet, revealing an indescribable complexity and indifference. Saul gritted his teeth to support his body not to fall. His heart was shocked by the power of Roy's punch, but his eyes were fixed on Roy, who was exposed in front of him. This is an order. For me, this is not just an order of naval headquarters, it is also an order of the world government. Roy said coldly, the rain wet his black hair. But Saul was keenly aware of an unusual emotion in his voice. Although he is a simple and honest giant raceman, his mind is more delicate than many people, otherwise he would not be aware of Velvia's difficulties. Have you seen that scene? Orovia's crew member of the adventure team, we Marine received the order at the time to kill on the spot. Saul yelled in sorrow. They are just a group of unarmed historians. Even if they break the law, they should not be mercilessly slaughtered without trial. We Marine, but maintain the peace and order of the sea and protect the existence of the weak. This is justice, isn't it? I once gave the order to Sengoku Admiral to present criminal evidence from historians, but guess what? Sengoku Admiral just rebutted me abruptly. There is no explanation, there is no reason, it is massacre. How do you let me start? Before he knew it, Saul burst into tears. Roy pressed his lips tightly, the cold rain seemed to make his lips blue and purple. Seeing Saul crying so loudly in front of him, the flood of memory suddenly smashed the dam in his mind. Picture after picture emerged in front of him and couldn't stop it. Finally, it freezes on an old face with red eyes. The old man lost his family, so he knows how painful it is. People say that pain can make people grow, but the King old man would rather not have this so-called growth. These pains do not have to be experienced by many civilians in this sea. What is justice? Why do you work hard? Lousy don't care. Lousy just wants to protect the world. Guardian families living in peace and happiness in this world, and prevent them from experiencing the pain that the old man has endured. As long as the old man walks down this road, the old man will have no regrets. The deafening voice exploded in the deepest part of the soul in my mind. What is justice? Maybe different people have different choices and beliefs. But for the stubborn old man Zephyr, for the same stubborn guy like Saul in front of him, their understanding of justice, they are all very similar. To be honest, Roy has not thought about this issue. The system only taught him to develop the habit of self-discipline. The military academy only cultivated his strong combat power. The war made him cherish the army and his comrades in arms. But this justice, he really didn't understand. Roy suddenly dropped his hand, smiled. Then let me see again what justice is, he said. Although doing so, there is a big risk. But he really wanted to know the answer to this question. 20 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters. Coming soon. Orovia only felt that his steps were getting heavier and heavier, as if every step was extremely difficult. The torrential rain wet the sand on the beach, almost every step, half of the foot as deeply plunged into it. But the hope and light in her eyes became brighter and brighter. The dilapidated warship that led them to break out of Marine's heavy encirclement is still anchored on the coastline. Although this battleship is so dilapidated, it seems to be crumbling in this storm, but at this moment in Orovia's eyes, it may be the safest refuge in life. But just before she was about to step onto the deck of a warship, boom! A green figure crashed down like a meteorite and appeared in front of Orovia's eyes. Orovia's face suddenly turned pale. It's okay, Orovia, no need to run. At this time, Saul's hoarse and weak voice came from the rain curtain behind him. Orovia was taken aback for a moment, raised his head and looked at the calm youth in front of him, and found that there was no killing intent in the latter's eyes. Tears could not help but burst into his eyes. At the same time, Naval Headquarters, Marineford. Training ground for senior officers. Two tall and burly figures collided frantically on the hot school field, like two human-shaped tyrannosaurs, blasting the ground under their feet into huge pits one after another. Every time the two collided, the boundless winds and waves set off abruptly blue hurricanes on the ground, sweeping yellow sand into the sky. Enough. Zephyr, you lunatic. It's not a solution for you to hold the old man like this. Garp gritted his teeth and growled, lowering his head to avoid Zephyr's shiny black fist. Bang bang bang. A burst of sonic booms exploded above his head, causing Garp's eyelids to jump sharply and his scalp to numb. Zephyr, is it for real? I just wanted to go to the military academy to comfort the desperate Zephyr with wine, but I didn't expect this bastard to pull himself to the school field like a stubborn bull. He didn't say anything, he just came and beat himself up. After getting a few black punches, Garp also reacted. Zephyr, this lunatic is looking for his own breath. His heart is so bitter, he didn't want to provoke him in the muddy waters of the world government. He is more annoyed by the world government in the celestial dragons with nostrils higher than the sky. This is why he is not promoted to Marine Admiral, because once he becomes Admiral, he is obliged to guard the holy land of celestial dragons, Marie Joys. Therefore, Garp and the world government have always been in a state of disagreement with each other. Stop talking nonsense, Garp, bring it on. Zephyr roared wildly. Garp raised his eyes subconsciously, but Zephyr's red eyes showed aggrieved and weak eyes. He gritted his teeth subconsciously and began to punch. The fierce collisions came and went one after another, and the Marine soldiers who were training in the distance were stunned, all pale and hiding away. After a while, both Garp and Zephyr opened their mouths and panted heavily, appearing to lie flat on the surface of the moon, full of pits and craters. Their faces were covered with fist marks of various bruises, and there were bloodstains on their mouths. Kakuzu. Puff. Garp spit out a gulp of blood from his mouth, cursing. Zephyr, you bastard is too heavy. Your uncle's lousy has been leaking words for a few days. But no one next to him responded. Zephyr? Garp turned his head subconsciously. But when he saw Zephyr staring at the sky above his head with red eyes, his eyes were blank. Garp, Buster Call has already started. You said Roy, how would you choose? Zephyr's voice had an indescribable hoarseness, and it sank straight down, as if entering a boundless darkness. Garp was stunned. A bitterness involuntarily appeared in the corners of his mouth. To be honest, I don't know. He is your student, not my student. However, if I had to make me guess, I always feel that something will happen. His voice gradually became low, and there was a bottomless haze flashing in the depths of his eyes. He remembered the scene of Roy being a bomb on the yard of a military school. I also remembered the sentence in the defense of Marineford, he killed my comrade in arms, I want revenge. How could this kind of person look at countless civilians in O'Hara and be completely wiped out by Marines' artillery fire? Zephyr sighed. I think so. The two fell into silence. In their eyes, Roy is Marine's rising star and hope. If this time the incident is not handled properly, the defeat of that share of will, it is likely to defeat his faith in justice. As Marine, strength may be important, but most importantly, it is the justice that they shoulder in their hearts. No matter how strong it is, what use is it if it is another Paluzolino? The storm that seemed to cover the entire world has ceased. But the sky is still gray, on the dilapidated warship. Saul held the crumbling masts and sails with one hand, and the huge, hilly figure almost filled the entire deck of the warship. Let's talk about it. How much do you know about the historical text and the secrets of the world government? Roy looked calm, folded his hands on his chest, and said flatly to Vervia, who was sitting on the deck in front of him with his hands on his knees. A hesitation flashed across Orovia's face, and she raised her head to look at Saul subconsciously. Saul raised his hand and wiped the bloodline, which had not been washed away by the rain, and smiled. Let's talk about it. There is no way to hide it. After the fight just now, Saul has clearly understood that with Roy's current strength, it is said that he can be defeated, and even both of them can be easily killed here. Resistance and concealment are no longer necessary. The two of them have been completely forced to the end. Oro Viabel bit his lip. But you are not afraid. If you know too much, will you be included in the hostile list of the world government? This matter is a taboo for the world government that no one can touch and will die. Even if you are the rising star of Marine, the world government will not be soft on you. Moreover, once the world government is determined to attack you, no one can keep you, not even Zephyr. I know. Roy's voice was so calm that Orovia felt terrible. But there are some problems. I have to figure it out. If first we're not Marine, but a civilian or even an unfettered pirate, I wouldn't have to bother about these troubles. But I am not. He suddenly smiled. No matter what kind of person I will become in the future, what kind of identity I am carrying, I am now a Marine. I have to figure this out. What is justice? What is the answer to this question that many Marines have never understood for a lifetime? It is impossible for him to give up seeking the answer to this question because of the threats and crises of the world government. He is no longer the otaku Roy who gave up casually because of a little difficulty and obstacles in the past. As for the final result, what does that matter? Now that I have come to this world, live happily. Live happily, will it be all right soon? Orovia was shocked by Roy's tone, his face changed slightly. She gave Roy a deep look with her wisdom and deep eyes. This supernova, who is too young and burdened with countless Marine expectations and pursuits. The mentality is so terribly mature and calm. She took a deep breath. Then on this shabby warship that was vacillating and heading towards O'Hara, a secret that had been hidden in this world for 800 years was told. After listening, Roy fell into a bottomless silence. What Orovia knows about the secrets of the world government in the history of 100 years of blank space is roughly the same as the O'Hara scholars in the original plot. These are just faint fragments, not enough to form a complete picture. I know this for now, maybe Dr. Kuraha of O'Hara will know more. Speaking of Orovia, she looked at Roy with a begging look. If Roy wants to know more, they must reach O'Hara before the buster call and protect the place. Dr. Kuraha, director of the O'Hara Tree of All-Knowing Library. I see. Roy slowly let go of his hand. He raised his head and looked far away. Looking at the vast and endless sea in the distance, the sullen suffocation in his heart that he had held since accepting the task seemed to gradually dissipate. World government. Do you just like to let me be a dog in your hands? Use this task to test my loyalty to the government. Use such a task to oppress my nature. A sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Saul, speed it up, or we won't be able to keep up. He said coldly, his tone gradually oozing with a deep chill. Saul and Orovia were overjoyed when they heard this. But before they could react, I saw Roy took out a military phone bug from his arms and dialed the special line of the headquarters. Bluebrew. The phone worm that was being connected made a weird sound, making both Saul and Orovia pale, holding their breath tightly, not daring to take a breath. Brew. The phone worm got through. Roy. Sengoku's deep and solemn voice came from the military phone worm. After Marshal Sora gave Roy a task, Admiral Sengoku, the headquarters of the Battle of O'Hara, became Roy's direct reporting superior in this task. Sengoku Admiral, the mission is complete, Orovia and Saul are dead. Saul desperately protected Orovia in the battle, and Orovia himself committed suicide after Saul was killed. I'm sorry, I couldn't stop her, Roy said solemnly, his eyes gleaming sharply. As Roy's indifferent voice fell, both Saul and Orovia who were next to each other had their pupils shrunk, and they suddenly took a breath of cold air in their hearts. Roy said this, it is equivalent to completely blocking his own back road. The military phone worm fell into a weird silence. After a while, Sengoku's low voice slowly rang in the phone worm. Roy Rear Admiral, you should know that the order given to you by the military was to capture the historian Orovia alive, right? With your strength, even if Saul tries his best to resist, it is impossible to stop you. Your explanation is too far-fetched. The old man needs evidence. Roy nodded as expected. I know, Sengoku Admiral, when the call is over, I will give you evidence. If that's the case, so be it. Sengoku's reply was blunt. You should have received the order, right? The buster call for West Blue Ohara has already been launched. Roy frowned. I received the order, Sengoku Admiral. Sengoku Kaido. That's fine, since you have also received the order. It means that you who are within West Blue are also the Marine members who must participate in the buster call operation this time. As for the nature of the buster call action, I don't need the old man to explain it to you himself, right? Roy said. I know. Once the buster call is launched, everything within the mission target range must be completely buried. There was a frightening silence in his voice. Sengoku paused. That's fine, let's go quickly. After you arrive in Ohara, report the mission to Sakazuki Vice Admiral and Kuzan Vice Admiral. This time the buster call old man will not be there in person. The execution of the task will be jointly supervised by Sakazuki and Kuzan Vice Admiral. Finished. Sengoku directly hung up the phone worm communication. There was a sudden silence on the deck of the warship. How do you plan to explain to Sengoku? Orovia said with a pale and trembling voice. Roy was silent and turned to look at Saul. Saul smiled disapprovingly and said freely. Come on, I didn't want this fate a long time ago. Orovia's face changed suddenly. As long as you protect Orovia and go home safely. A hearty smile appeared on Saul's honest face, his eyes full of determination and freedom. Roy, I beg you. Saul has never asked anyone in my life. But now, I just beg you once. He struggled to prop up his huge, scarred body, and knelt down in front of Roy. The terrifying weight crushed the deck beneath his feet. Please protect Orovia and let her return to her hometown. After that, you can kill me anytime after that. Orovia interrupted Saul with red eyes, gritted his teeth. In this case, you can also give Naval Headquarters a reasonable answer. Take my corpse. Orovia said solemnly. Roy smiled. This kind of thing, let's talk about it later. But now. He looked at Saul, his palms and 5 fingers close together like swords, and waves of boundless blue air lingered on it, and the sharpness it exuded seemed to be the sharpest weapon in the world. Saul, are you ready? Saul smiled and slowly closed his eyes. Then, a blue light flashed in the void. Saul couldn't help making a low muffled sound, but suddenly opened his eyes flashing in disbelief. His arm was easily cut off, dragging the scarlet blood to the ground, and bloodlines spilled all over the floor. Roy squatted down, ignited a fire on the ground, and burned towards Saul's broken arm, burning a burst of black marks. In the air, bursts of weird smell permeated out, making people nauseous. Things to be protected, just protect them well. Hurry up and bandage it. For a strong man of your level, if you break an arm, your combat power may be reduced a bit, but at least you can still maintain a certain combat power. One arm is for your life, this deal is not a loss, right? Roy said solemnly. While talking, he took out the military phone worm, took a picture of the charred huge broken arm, and sent it to Sengoku. Saul was taken aback when he heard the words, and then laughed and cried. No loss, absolutely no loss. Now that Roy can say that, it has already been explained that he will not attack himself and Orovia. This was undoubtedly the biggest surprise for the two of them who were bound to die. As for one of my own arms, what does that matter? After Roy finished all this, he sighed softly. At least this way, I can barely fool Sengoku's side. I have to hurry up. He murmured softly, then took out his personal phone bug and started to figure it out. At the same time, Naval Headquarters Marineford. Headquarters Admiral Office. Sengoku looked at the picture transmitted from the military phone worm image, and his eyebrows were wrinkled into a chuan, as if they had been filled in with a black pen. In the picture, it was a huge arm that seemed to have been burned by flames. The arm of the giant, the scorched traces of flames. Sengoku subconsciously popped up in his mind during the Marineford defense battle that day. Roy's shocking tricks on the main battlefield. The high-speed fist even penetrated the air, and the powerful force caused the fist to emit a strong spark, sweeping up a grand firework like a meteor flame. A picture that seems impeccable. The broken arm is Saul's arm. The trick is Roy's trick, but Sengoku always felt something wrong in his heart. Although everything in front of you is in line with common sense, Sengoku, who has the reputation of the resourceful general in the military, has a hidden smell of concealment. Do not know why, he always felt that Roy was unlikely to kill Saul so decisively. But the evidence in front of him made him unable to spot any faults at all. Forget it. When Ohara's buster call completely erupts, everything will come to light. Sengoku suddenly put down the military phone worm in his hand and let out a long sigh with furrowed brows. Roy, I hope you don't let the old man down. Such a thought suddenly flashed in his mind. West Blue. A branch. Are you sure you want to do this, Roy? A silhouette in the cape of Lieutenant Colonel Marine holds a phone worm in her hand, her pretty face full of dignity. Hina knows you want to save people, but this time it's Buster Call. This shadow is Hina. After graduating from the military, she returned to West Blue and served as the deputy base commander of the Marine branch. Well, I have decided, Hina. Roy's cautious voice came from the phone worm. But this matter is very risky. If the headquarters really wants to investigate it seriously, your military rank is likely to be smashed to the end. So this is just a request from me. You can seriously consider it. No matter what decision you make in the end, I won't blame you. Hina promises you. Hina suddenly shouted anxiously at the phone worm. No matter what it is, Hina will promise you. Hina. Thank you for being able to think of Hina. When he said this, a blush appeared on Hina's fair face, and his voice was as low as a mosquito. Roy fell silent suddenly. Roy, wait for Hina. Hina will leave right away. After speaking, Hina hung up the phone, fearing that Roy would not agree. She put the phone worm in her hand, and then strode out to go out. Outside, when the two Marine soldiers saw Hina coming out, they immediately saluted. Hina, deputy head of base. At this moment, where is Hina, still the shyness of the little girl just now, nodding to her two guards with a serious face. If the order is passed on, I, with the order of the deputy base commander, set out all the 15 warships under this branch. Destination O'Hara. The two private soldiers were taken aback by the furious Hina, subconsciously Kaido. But Hina, deputy base commander, without the command of the base commander, you can only have command of 5 warships at most. Hina glanced at both of them coldly, and the beautiful eyes were filled with coldness and threats. How long do you think Daolun, the base leader, can sit? Do you think he and the West Blue nobles are ruined? Nobody really knows? The two suddenly felt a chill. This military academy who descended from the headquarters quietly understood everything about the base commander. Let's go. Which side should you stand at this time, should you understand? Hina said coldly, raising her hand to tie her long pink hair into a ponytail behind her head. The gust of wind blew the cloak of justice behind her. The figure is heroic and upright. At the same time, akin. The second and third commanders in the major marine branches of West Blue also received similar communications. And then exhausted the power in his hands, as far as possible, he commanded the warships in the branch to set off in a mighty manner. Each of them may come from different places, each of them may be strong or weak. Their military ranks may be high or low, but all of them, all have a common identity, graduates of the 7th period of naval headquarters. What is even more terrifying is that this time they almost offended and defied military regulations. Even risking the future of his political career, is it just because of a man's order? That person, it's the back figure they want to follow all their lives. It is also the idol most worshipped in their hearts.